So we'll go on to the first session now, that's building the resistance, breaking the mould. And I'm really pleased to introduce Professor Peter Beresford, Chair of Shaping Our Lives. Welcome, Peter, and thank you for attending. So it's over to you.
Thanks a lot. And can I just say hello to everyone? Great to be with you today, if only virtually. And social care is something that's long concerned me, probably because I've often needed its help in my life. It's the critical public policy for people who need some help to live their lives, whether for reasons of age, youth or older age, impairment, distress, or other difficulty. It really is a measure of a society, how well it responds to this human and personal social justice and human rights challenge. And sadly, it seems to me that our society, whatever the values and hopes of its people, measures up pretty badly. And at this time, it seems our politics measure up even worse. Key issues like social care, for me, the most important, as I've said, for all of us to maintain our lives in the face of difficulty, have been marginalized, and supposedly more important issues like harassing refugees or attacking people on welfare benefits or trans people are given all the headlines and political attention. Indeed, our society seems to have responded to the social care challenge worse and worse. And that's true both of the policies for support it provides and policies no less important for income maintenance, both of which are crucial and both of which, to put it politely, are highly inadequate and sometimes denying people's human, civil and social rights rather than safeguarding them. Social care and independent living shouldn't be about unaccountable offshore accounts for profit-taking, unloving big corporations, poverty-level devalued workers, over-institutionalization, leaving things to get bad for people rather than stepping in supportively to prevent that, unnecessary impoverishment, neglect, and abuse. Truth is, it now is very much about all these damaging things, and no end is in sight. Sadly, social care seems to be a system where what's good is largely about the people working in it, and what's bad, the ideology, economics, values, and top-down bureaucracy and managerialism of the systems, the organizations and corporations that control it. It's also, sadly, a system that's shown that the rationale for ensuring the acceptability of the market as a service provider, that it can be regulated and maintain a decent quality, have never worked and continue to be illusory and defective. And this has all got worse, first since policymakers, particularly from Thatcher onwards, sought to demarcate care as distinct, separate from the NHS and narrow the latter's boundaries, and second since they moved to a model of outsourcing, privatising care, treating it mainly as a commodity that left many at the mercy of having to purchase service rather than secure it as an entitlement. Since then, policy history has mainly been one of avoiding resolving the massive consequent problems, first from the failed commission established at the beginning of the Blair government through the inadequate Dilnot review, and since the continuing failures even to face up to implementing that, let alone what we know most of us actually want, social care on the same essential basis as the NHS, which ultimately it's inseparable from, based on the disabled people's movement's philosophy of independent living, a universal service paid for through general progressive taxation, free at the point of delivery. And we must continue as today fighting for that. But in an age of increasingly right-wing populist politics, with politicians always looking over their shoulder, it seems, to match that kind of non-interventionist, anti-supportive state politics, we've got to hope, but we shouldn't expect real change. Real social care and independent living fit very badly with neoliberal ideology, which continues to dog and dominate our formal politics, and does so sadly globally, adding to so many crises facing us, the planet, peace, the global south, our economy, our health and well-being, our understanding of each other. So I believe any struggle for real social care, real independent living, must also be a struggle for renewing democratic politics, for real citizen and service user involvement, and for redistribution of power and resources away from the currently controlling 1% and its populist reaction, and back to the principles of democracy. Social care, or what, as I have said, I prefer to call independent living, is perhaps one of the most personal of political policies. It's concerned with our minds and bodies, our spirits and surroundings. Ultimately, we may need to change our politics for them to understand and value it and this. That's at the heart of this. That's why I place such an emphasis here on the importance of inclusive involvement in social care and humanizing our politics, drawing them back from the precipice they now seem to be on the edge of. As I made my way here back home, there was a demonstration from the so-called Reform Party, which gives you an inkling of where we are. This struggle, where our struggle is happily still going on. We see so many constituencies, against the kind of neoliberal populism that's damaging our society, fighting for rights to equality and self-determination, for peace and sustainability. So many new social movements, the women's, anti-racist, LGBTQIA, survivors, disabled peoples, environmental, and so on. And what I want to stress here is that those of us committed to real social care and independent living to need to move on from traditional reliance on old-style charities to more user-led struggle with and by. Supporting self-organization, and most important, building alliances, truly equal alliances between us and other new social movements, and with social care, so that instead of remaining ineffectual minorities trying to combat the 1% overclass, we become what we truly are, a united 99% majority, including diversity with equality, highlighting our intersectionality, our overlaps, hammering white privilege and the many relics of colonialism, and securing the rights almost all of us are committed to support each other, to live the fullest, most realized lives we can, regardless of the limits age or infirmity might want to impose on us. And as we do this, opening up and supporting in an age of artificial intelligence that will wipe out traditional economic understandings and devaluing low-grade toil, the most wonderful work any of us can do for each other, whether as loved ones or workers, according to what we want as people, is supporting and looking after each other, which no computer or artificial intelligence will ever adequately do. Here is the employment, the worthwhile employment we can all take part in for the future. We have an agenda, we have a means of realizing it together. Today is part of starting on the road for real human change and growth, mutuality, care, and self-realization. It's in our hands. Thanks ever so much, everybody. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much there, Peter. I think no one can disagree with what you've said there. That's a fabulous contribution. And I will ask now if anyone has any questions for Peter. If you do in the room, raise your hand. Yes, Mike.
I'm taking the mic to Mike.
Mike comes to meet the mic halfway. Peter, thank you. That was inspirational. It really was. And I've read your stuff, but I've never heard you talk, and it was great. What I wanted to ask is, what inputs, if any, are you having into the Casey Commission? And are you able to front-end load it in any way or use your persuasive powers?
Well, what a good question. And I mean, I know that they're taking evidence. I know that they're going on for a long, long time. I don't think there'll be any grass by the time they finish doing their kicking. But I'm co-chair of a national disabled people and service user organisation. At no stage have we been approached by the Casey Commission. And I have to say, from previous commissions that have been undertaken, not least that on the Metropolitan Police, the response seems to be nothing. Nothing seems to happen. And I'm not saying I would dismiss any opportunity to contribute to the Casey Commission and to say to it exactly the same things that I'm saying here today, but I'm not asked, and I don't feel there's going to be a lot of point in all of us spending too much energy. I think that the approach of collecting what people have got to say and making sure it gets heard is right. But whether it gets acted on, the history of Casey and her commissions is not encouraging. And nor, of course, as I've already spelled out, is the history of inquiries and investigations into social care. What fascinates and dismays me is that in an age when there's no question with the nature of our population, with more disabled people, thank God, surviving into adulthood and beyond, with people living much longer lives, with children and young people surviving too, and disabled people having their own children, that this is all seen as such a marginal, off-the-wall issue. It is an issue that concerns us all. And I think as time is passing in societies like ours, we're going to see the people included as disabled people making up not a minority, but a majority. And in fact, I think it's that fear and disbelief that that could be true, which is motivating our governments and our policymakers to say that so many disabled people aren't disabled people at all and should get off the benefits. My partner is a welfare rights advisor working with older people and disabled people, and the daily stories that she picks up on of the way that people are treated, harassed, ignored, and denied. I can't say how terrible they seem to me on a daily basis, and that's what we're struggling with social care and benefits. And it wouldn't take a genius, maybe just looking at a couple of articles, for a commission to recognise this is the reality and something serious must be done. But it would appear from hearing what governments say and looking at the front pages of newspapers that this is not on the agenda, our political agenda. Our political agenda is corrupted by populist filth, and that's what worries me. And of course, every group of people, including disabled people, including refugees and asylum asylum seekers, includes overlaps, and we're all in one way or other being harassed. And that's why unity is the next stage in our campaigning, as far as I'm concerned. But unity based on developing inclusive and equal alliances which respect our difference, that we have different ways of communicating, that there are barriers which are different that face us.
Thank you so much, Peter. That didn't seem right, thought it wasn't. Thank you, Peter. Very heartfelt contribution there, I think we would agree. Another person wishes to speak from the floor.
Thank you. I'm Colin Hutchinson. I'm an elected member of Calderdale Council, and I was wondering whether you felt there was any prospect at all of the tax changes that you've suggested it seems completely nonsense to fund social care through council tax. When 75% of our budget goes on adult and children's social care, it leaves precious little for all the important things that are needed to improve our local conditions, whether it's housing, whether it's parks and green spaces, sports centres, and community cohesion, that the services that the vast majority of the population need are being constantly squeezed because of the increasing costs of social care. And that is pitting one part of the community against the other. So it's extremely divisive. Do you see any realistic prospect, any major push to take social care out of local taxation and into national progressive taxation?
Thank you for that. And what you do, I think, there is you highlight the subtle and never-ending way in which issues like local resourcing and taxes have gone over the last 50 plus years. Because if you look back, you will find that local resources, local facilities were funded at least 50% by central government. And of course, the game that's been on from Thatcher onwards has been to reduce that central support. But what's ironic, of course, is we have never had such inadequate, deficient or costly services, and at the same time pay so much local and central taxation. I mean, it's ironic. I'm talking about us as ordinary people. Of course, it's a very different picture when you look at the 1% and the overprivileged, whose taxation bills are very different from ours, which are rooted in our being ordinary members of society who are accountable. So if I was to be offering a very short-term answer, I'd say, you know, this is not on the agenda, but it isn't on past agendas. But what's happening now, and I'm hoping that we can see the squalor of parties like the proto-fascist Reform Party as symptomatic of people's dissatisfaction with where we've been. But there are other interesting things happening. We've just seen it happen in Wales with the way in which Reform haven't been successful. The Welsh Party has, and the Labour Party's had a disastrous time. And where people are saying to Labour, even people who support and value Labour, you're going to have to do different. And I think there is no long-term solution the way we're going. It is causing reactions of both a negative and a positive sort. Our politics are going to have to change. And if traditional politicians, like perhaps our present Prime Minister, can't see that, then others are going to be taking over. They may in the short term lead us in very dangerous places, but I think there is something about democracy which will survive this, God willing, and we will find our way to meeting the needs and rights of people en masse, because I think that people have an essential understanding of their common humanity, and that's what's going to keep us going. And that's why we need to build the understanding that disabled and older people have, people with mental distress have of their circumstances from their lived experience, to make that something that's better understood by people who may not share those difficulties, but will have their own. Because so many of us do, in one way or another, whether as women, whether as people from Black and minority ethnic communities, as refugees, as trans people, and so on. In fact, the list of minorities makes up the majority, but it's the minority that holds the power. But the politics, as long as we remain at least in intent a democracy, that will change. But it's the long haul. We've got to think of this as the long haul. That's what I feel. That change will come.
Yes, thank you, Peter.
It really is like that Black pioneer said, you know, I may not get there with you. Many of us may not get there with this, but it's going to happen if anything good is going to happen. That's what I really feel as an older person.
Brilliant, thank you. And speaking as another older person, we did have a campaign once called 68 is too late to receive your state pension. I believe that 28 is too late for the Casey Commission to start doing something about social care.
Yeah, yeah.
And we now also have a question online from Mark Lines. Mark, you can...
Yeah, just to add to Colin's point really, and to make a point that many people who receive support have to, on benefits for example, also, depending on their circumstances, have to pay towards their care services through further charging and all other things, as well as paying normal bills. So a lot of people think that disabled people just get the support, but actually the support they get is put back by further charging and other charges that we and other people on benefits face, which is not very often commented on. So I just wanted to make that point about that disabled people actually spend quite a lot of their income, whether they get support or not, on the services that they receive.
And Mark, hello, great to see you. Not only is this a harassment of disabled people, but if you tried, as I don't doubt some people have done, but we don't get to hear, if you try to add up what all this awful balmy policy costs, it will be enormous. And it reminds me also what you're saying of the other thing that we are encouraged as ordinary people to believe, that there are all these people on benefits who should be forced into work. And the truth is that so many people on benefits are working. we live in a low-wage economy, which governments have colluded with for some reason, which of course then means that we as people, as taxpayers, because we are all taxpayers, not only have to work and work at inadequate income, but we then are lambasted for having to get benefits. That's absolutely balmy. All it means is that the population and the state are subsidizing companies that are profiting from not paying proper wages to people. And that's another thing, of course, that doesn't get surfaced on the front pages of the Times and the Sun newspapers, but it's the truth. Thanks for that, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent question there, Mark, as well. I must agree. If we've any more questions online, don't believe we have. No. Anyone else in the room? We'll take one further question and then we'll call in our next speaker. Anyone else wants to speak? No, I think that's been perfectly covered then, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your
Thanks,
heartfelt
everybody.
contribution.
We'll get there. We will get there.
We're determined to get there. Thank you. Next, I'm pleased to welcome, if she's here, Rachael Tomlinson, who is a disabled activist and blogger, chair of the ESCaD, or End Social Care Disgrace, Publicity group. And over to you, Rachael. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to everyone in the room as well. I don't actually know how to follow that, Peter. Other than I can give you a bit of experience of what's going on in my world at the moment. As Jackie's just said, I'm Rachael. I'm the chair of the End Social Care Disgrace Publicity group. I also have my own business, which is as an advocate to disabled people and people living with MS. Following a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis in 2018, I suddenly moved out of the activist arena as a chasing for wages and supporting NHS workers as a union member and about to be a union rep into the disabled and older people's arena. And I'm now disabled, and I'm also a carer. So I shall explain a few words about that. We know those words don't usually go together, do they? Most people imagine carers as strong, tireless, always putting others first, and disabled people as the ones who need help. But some of us live right in the middle of that, caring while needing care ourselves. As I've just said, I live with multiple sclerosis. I use a wheelchair. I can stand. I can't stand for very long. I care for someone full time, and I also have a dog who depends on me every single day. I love them both dearly, but love doesn't make it easy. Being a disabled carer is like walking a tightrope in a storm. You're constantly balancing two sets of needs, theirs and yours, and only one of you gets support. There are days when my body simply refuses. The fatigue, the balance problems, the pain, they take over, but the care doesn't stop when I'm unwell. I'm still getting the phone calls, I'm still getting the text messages saying, can you come and sort this out? A little bit of an explanation. My mother lives with, we haven't got a dementia confirmation, but we do. She does have serious memory problems, and she's 88 years old, so you expect at 88 years old to have memory problems. But there's still meals to cook, medication to sort, appointments to keep, and no matter how much I hurt, my dog still needs me. Because life goes on, whether you're well or not. People say to me, I don't know how you do it. Sometimes I don't either. You just keep going, because if you stop, everything stops. There's no backup plan. No one swoops in to say, rest, we'll take it from here. You just dig deep and hope your body holds out for another day. But a few weeks ago, it didn't. I was leaving a rugby match, wrapped up in the emotion of the final match of the season, when suddenly my ears started ringing and my left leg and arm went numb. And I collapsed. 1 minute I was walking down the steps, aided by my friends. The next I was on the floor, unable to move. I woke up being rushed into hospital, scared, confused and in pain. But my first thought wasn't, am I okay? It was, who's going to look after mum? Even in hospital, hooked up to machines, I was still making phone calls, arranging care, arranging my sister to come through and checking on the dog. Thankfully, my dog was in the kennels, so they just extended that. But physically, I'm a patient. Mentally, I'm still a carer. There's no emergency plan, no one to step in, no backup care, no help. When I came home, there was no recovery plan either, just the same responsibilities waiting. In fact, they let me home severely infected with pneumonia, which was probably not a very good idea, but they obviously needed the bed. That's another argument for keep our NHS public. The system doesn't see people like me. We fall through every gap there is. Even my dog is part of that story. He's not just a pet, he's company, he's comfort, my reason to get up in the morning. But when I was taken into hospital, no one asked who was looking after him. Thankfully, as I say, he was in the kennel, so they just kept him. But it could have been different, and I don't think people take that into consideration. When there is a pet in the house, what happens when you're suddenly unable to do anything? So it might sound small, but it isn't. It shows how unprepared our systems are for real life, for messy human situations where care, illness and love all mix together. And then there's the fear of losing what little support we do have, as Peter has spoken of. For disabled carers, benefits are not handouts, they are lifelines. They keep us afloat, covering heating, medication, travel, food, the basics of surviving. But that safety net is really fragile. And being in the arena of advocacy and supporting people, I hear of this all the time. Miss an assessment because you're in hospital and you risk losing everything. Tell them your condition has worsened, and instead of more support, you're retested, rejudged and treated with suspicion. I'm just currently going through a PIP review because they found out I was working. I work about 5 hours a week. It's a cruel irony. We're praised for saving the government billions in care, yet treated like burdens when we need help ourselves. When benefits are cut, it doesn't just affect one person, it collapses the entire care network. Because when the carer falls, the person they care for falls too. It doesn't have to be this way though, does it? Imagine if there were emergency care plans that kicked in when a carer was hospitalised. Imagine if benefits paused safely during his illness. Imagine if every disabled carer had access to short-term backup care so they could actually recover. That's not radical, that's basic humanity. I'm not asking for pity, I'm asking for recognition. Recognise that disabled carers exist. Recognise that care doesn't stop when we're sick. Recognise that benefits aren't luxuries, they're survival. We need systems built on compassion, not suspicion and mainstream media. Policies that see the person, not the paperwork, and a government that understands when the carer needs care, the system must care back. Because if we truly value care, then we must also care for those who give it, even when their own bodies are failing them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that. That's better. I keep doing that. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that contribution. I hope Baloo is okay. Anyway, has anyone got any questions for Rachel? Yes.
Hello, Rachel. Thank
Hello.
you for your input. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
I used to be a mental health social worker in Leeds for many years, and I particularly was interested in your discussion about your dog, and if people need care or hospital, and there used to be a power under Section 48 of the National Assistance Act, where 1948, where the local authority had to look after your property if you, say, had to go into hospital, couldn't manage, including your pets. And that's been superseded by the Care Act, I think, and I don't know what happens now. This is something that has concerned me greatly recently when trying to help friends who've had to go into mental health hospital, who've got property or animals to be looked after. There seems to be no duty now to get legal advice, and legal advice or help with property. And I wondered if that's something that ought to be added to our aims and activities, but I wondered what you thought about that, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the main things for me, which is really concerning, is if you're claiming or in receipt of any benefits, then they will ask you, as you know, it's one of the questions that comes up on a PIP assessment. Why, how do you manage with your dog? And it's like, it's not actually how I manage with my dog. It's what my dog does for me that you've got, the same as it is with pets, any pets, cats or anything. And that would always be my answer if anybody questioned why I had a dog. He is I mean, everybody knows he's a nightmare, but he's a nightmare 1% of the time, probably 99% of the time. He's just company. And I really don't know what I'd do without him. And there were considerations made when I came out of hospital that I really couldn't cope with him, because I'd also just lost a long-time dog walker at the time. So I had to quickly find another dog walker. And it was like, I was seriously considering giving him up. And then it was like, actually, no, you can't do that. You don't give up at the first hurdle. We've got to get through this somehow. So I did manage to find another dog walker. And I'm very fortunate that the kennels that I use is fabulous. I rang him and he just said, don't worry about Baloo, I'll look after Baloo. And to be fair, he even brought him home to me. He kept him for 4 days and he brought him home to me. I didn't even have to go and pick him up. But there isn't actually anything anywhere, I don't think, that talks about dealing with pets if someone's suddenly rushed into hospital. And having worked in the rescue arena over the years, the dog rescue arena over the years, I'm well aware of the fact that a lot of the dogs that do come in because either someone's died or someone is in hospital or has had to go and look after somebody else who was in hospital. But there aren't even the spaces in the rescues nowadays because, thanks to COVID, when everybody decided to buy dogs and then afterwards decided they didn't need dogs, the rescues are just absolutely overwhelmed everywhere. So I couldn't even get him in just to have like 2 or 3 weeks in foster just to give me a rest, so to say, and be able to deal with my mum as well at the same time. Because she don't understand when you say to her, well, there's not a lot I can do, Mum, because I've got pneumonia. So I'm sorry, I'm trying my best, but it's not easy. So yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you.
I wondered, in Leeds, what we've tried to do is get legal advice to apply the acts for looking after people's property and particularly their pets. In Leeds, we've now all the law centre closed, and the only way we can get free legal advice seems to be the University of Law, but of course they're closed during holiday times, university holiday times. So it's very, very difficult to get advice about that. And I'd love to hear from other people how they've managed with this issue across the country, or what action people have done to try and get legal advice. Particularly it is for the care of your property, especially your animals. Thank you.
We've got a couple more questions online, actually. I think we'll need to go to them first. Okay. So first of all, we've got Rosemary Penn. If you want to give your question, Rosemary, please.
Hi. I admire you very much, Rachel. I cannot imagine how hard it must be for you. I lost my mother after 7 years of dementia. She lived 245 miles away. I got no social care at all. GPs refusing to diagnose whether she had dementia or not. When you've known your mother all your life, you know. I had a series of private carers come in because they couldn't go via social care because they weren't interested. They stole off her, they hit her. I cannot begin to tell you. I'm going to try and not start crying, but it was horrendous. I was constantly driving. I live in Cornwall. My mother lives in West Sussex, or lived in West Sussex. I ended up smashing my car up on the way home because I literally had a nervous breakdown. Fortunately, I had a good GP who just said, come on in, which you wouldn't get today. As I said, it was 7 years ago. And I wasn't well either. I have ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. I've got heart problems. I've got asthma. I've got COPD. You know, who cares? It's just you try and cope. You know, I'm lucky that I had a car and I could drive up. But I mean, sometimes I'll be driving up at 1 o'clock in the morning. You have one dog, I have 12. Call me a hoarder. I fortunately had a girl who could just sort of jump in at short notice. However, you know, I was paying for her. She wasn't always available, and sometimes I just had to leave the door open and some food down for them, and travel up. It was so stressful. Well, I had to give my job up, which was quite a senior role. But my mother was more important. She was phoning me at work all the time. I had to interrupt. I was teaching, but at a coaching sort of entrepreneur level. I had to give it up because my mother came first. So I lost my income. I couldn't claim benefits. I didn't even go down that route. You know, you just sort of think, well, you can't think of that. You are just focused on your parent. And my mother was my best friend. I eventually nobody would fund it. Social care weren't interested. The only time social services got involved was to criticise what I was doing. The GP was trying to insist I put her in a home. My mother wanted to be at home. I was
short of time.
Promised her that.
Just finish.
Sorry.
Your contribution, please. Yeah.
Do you want me to stop?
Or you know, wind up. But we've got another.
I just want to say that you know that the support isn't there fundamentally. And sorry, I'm just trying. I get passionate about it. It's important that there is somebody there to help. And the only time social services got involved was to criticise what I was doing because I wouldn't put her in a home. You know, it's looking at your rights on both sides, you know, your rights as to access to care and your rights to give your loved one what they want.
Rosemary, we'll have to leave it there. But if you did want to put anything else in chat afterwards.
No, that's fine. I'm sorry. I just.
And we can let people know the rest of what you were feeling. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear all that. It's just, but you're right, there isn't any support. We asked for support from Mum and we're just told that she wasn't bad enough. And it's like, well, she is. I mean, she's fallen a couple of times and we've managed to get the falls team out. They came out on instruction of Careline. But they only had a couple of sessions with her and gave her some exercises and gave us something else. 12 dogs, I admire you. Because this one feels like 12 dogs at times. But yes, you can contact us through and Social Care Disgrace. And if you don't if you want to put anything else in the chat, then I'm happy to pick it up afterwards. Thank you. Thanks, Rosemary.
Another thought, actually, that we are collecting comments for the Casey review. So I'm sure it would be useful to have personal stories like that sent on to them. So if you can get in touch with us, that would be great, Rosemary. Thank you. Jo, are you all right if we take one more person?
Yes, sure.
Thank you so much. You're so nice. Ava Macaulay, if you can ask your question as well, please. Thank you.
Hiya. I just wanted to share a little bit about what I feel like needs to sort of change in this field a bit. So I'm Ava, I'm autistic and rely on social care services and deliver training as a speaker and also write my own blog. So my main question is around social care cuts and involving people and decisions that are made by people in power when they shouldn't be made in such a drastic way. So last year, a social worker cut my support hours from 24 to 8 suddenly without involving me or any of the professionals involved. I went from overnight being supported around the clock to left in constant state of crisis, and I was left in a crisis in the community, and as a result of this, I was admitted to hospital for 1 year, completely stripped of my autonomy. I was stuck in there under a dole's for an entire year while the NHS had to take my case to the highest commissioners to be able to get my support reinstated. The system forgets that under bureaucracy, there's a real person with real needs. And I know that prior going into hospital, I tried to get a solicitor as I knew that the Care Act had been broken and it was obvious, but they said that I didn't have a case. So my question seems to be around, but there seems to be a gap between the law and what is applied in practice. And if the Prime Minister breaks the law, there's consequences. So how on earth can these professionals break the law and there be no accountability? There needs to be some more co-production when designing support services for autistic and neurodivergent people. But I know that not just my case, but there's been constant situations with people where their services have been cut. But I just don't understand how that can happen. These are people's lives that they are messing with. Thank you.
Thank you. It's something that we all come across every day, especially in this arena. And you're right. You are completely right with this. And there may be some more discussion on this today, further down today, if that helps. Further down the conference today, if you see what I mean. Apologies if the dog was rattling in the background. We have a lovely dog, don't we?
Maybe, I don't know, but maybe as part of the conference going forward when it comes to government, maybe this is something that needs to be made, they need to be aware of, and it would be good to be able to push. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that we are fighting for is more co-production, and unless people know what the true situation is, nobody actually realises how that is damaging people. How it is affecting their lives. So it is something that we are very keen to change. Mike, I'm sorry, I will have to leave you unless you're very brief, because no, we need to call Joe in. Sorry, we need to call Joe in. Thank you. Thanks very much, Rachel, for that. We'll now move to our next speaker, Joe Walton, who is chair of the ESCaD Carers Group and various other wonderful things.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to ESCaD for inviting me to speak, and thanks to everyone for being here in the flesh and virtually. I've been asked to speak about carers building resistance to the status quo. I found it difficult to know where to start, what to focus on, because I've only got 8 minutes. I think I might have a bit less now. So here goes, from the beginning. Carers don't ask for the job. It comes to them, knocks on the door and says, let me in. It can happen at any time in a person's life. Statistics indicate that 4.3 million people every year become carers, while 4 million leave their caring role. At least 5.8 million people in the UK are carers. This is likely to be a severe underestimate, with other estimates at 13% of the population having caring responsibilities. That's somewhere between 1 in 8 and 1 in 9 people in the UK. 1.7 million of those are providing 50 hours or over of care every week. And many carers right across the whole age range take years to realise that that is what they are. For some carers, the label arrives overnight as a result of a catastrophic event. For some, it creeps up on them over years. And for some, they are born into it and they grow up through it. Yes, there are child carers, 800,000 of them, some of them as young as 5. 140,000 of those, 3,000 between the ages of 5 and 9, do 50 hours and more of caring per week. Quite honestly, it's a national disgrace. What are my credentials to talk on here on this subject? I became a carer along with my husband in 2004. Our bright, intelligent and hard-working daughter went from being a degree-qualified midwifery student living a very satisfying life in London to someone who needed 24-hour nursing care, all in the space of 10 months because of a devastating degenerative neurological illness caused by the measles virus. We spent from May 2004 and February 2025 caring for her 24/7 with minimal help. That in itself is another discussion. And then it came to an abrupt end. And that is another story. Let's focus now on how carers actually survive. The impact on carers' lives is significant. There is no work-life balance in households where care is needed and given through love. There may be paid work, but research shows that 44% of carers had to reduce their hours at work because of caring responsibilities. 2.7 million carers are not in paid work, and those who do work, 38% of them are working part-time. Benefits for carers are dire. A measly £81.90 per week, but only if you care for 35 hours or more. That's a full-time job. Only for one person in the household, even when 2 are needed to do the task. And don't dare earn more than £196 per week in part-time wages, otherwise you will have to pay all of that money back, not just the bit that was overpaid. Carers are more likely to be in low-wage, zero-hour contracts or part-time roles, where losing track of your earnings is easy, especially when juggling all of the other fights for care, support, health interventions, adaptations, benefits, education, transport, and battling lack of sleep and emotional and physical exhaustion. But even with access to the information they need to prevent overpayments in the current system, the DWP would rather penalise carers, adding more stress to their daily lives, than to give them the support they deserve. Carers save the Treasury £182 billion a year, whilst constantly losing in terms of their own income. Recent research suggests that the lost paid labour of unpaid carers costs the UK a further £47.7 billion. That's 1.7% of gross domestic product. They miss out on the reassurance that they can earn a decent salary to keep the roof over their head, food in their stomachs, and enough to save for a rainy day. Their rainy day has already come. Nothing to do with lack of planning or hard work. It was just random and devastating. They lose careers, they lose chances in education, the ability to own their own home, they lack the security of long-term rental, and there are massive issues around private rentals and adapted accommodation. They lose the opportunity to spend leisure time with friends and relatives, they miss family celebrations, they don't go on holiday, they lose their own identity. But still, the government wants them to work harder and survive on less. Carers have had enough. It's not unreasonable to expect appropriate support whilst undertaking a task that the government would otherwise have to shoulder. They may not be in paid full-time employment, but they work hard, long, unsociable hours and without the benefits of working time directives and health and safety legislation. The household expenses of those many carers who live with those needing care are vastly greater than in normal households. Research indicates that disabled households need an additional £1,010 a month to have a similar standard of living to those non-disabled households. And this continues to rise as the cost of living rises, especially around energy costs. Caring is not employment, but it is work. Carers are contributing to the economy. We accept the government would find it difficult to give carers a wage because of health and safety issues and working time directives. But in order to have a reasonable standard of living, carers deserve an income to compensate for the caring duties they undertake. A stipend, if you like, which addresses the disproportionate impact that care has on household expenses. Carers need access to national insurance contributions for pensions, for sickness benefits and for paid holidays, to works pension accumulation to supplement meagre state pensions in old age, the ability to save to pay for normal household expenditures, the ability to take out and maintain mortgages so they have security within their own home, or security of tenure on rental accommodation, which needs to continue even after the worst happens. It's unlikely that the government will accept that carers need to be paid minimum wage for the hours they care, although this would have some fairness about it. Those who care 24/7 would therefore be entitled to £111,000 a year. And even if you took the notional 7 hours of sleep out, which many don't get, it would be almost £79,000 a year. ESCaD Carers Group has looked around, made comparisons to similar types of roles where there are no time limits or health and safety on the job. There seems to be many similarities with the roles of ministers of religion across all faiths. Stipends, their remuneration, vary from £17,000 a year to, in some cases, £52,000 a year. That doesn't take into account the added factor of tied housing, which makes that remuneration actually much higher. We looked at the research undertaken by various groups into how much income a person or family needs to live reasonably comfortably, and have added in the disability premium that I spoke of earlier. We feel that an income of £35,000 a year is not unreasonable for those who are working 24/7. This could, of course, be adjusted to account for the time spent caring and the area of the country that people live in and the number of people required to undertake the task. Some kind of action would also need to be taken for those who are under 16, who truly do a very loving job, but whose adulthood continues to be adversely affected by their altruism. It's no wonder that the government prefer a measly £81.90 a week. There would be benefits to the economy, though. The money in carers' pockets would be spent in the local economy, which would trickle down to the Treasury through VAT returns, income tax and national insurance of the carers themselves and those who are employed on the back of the increased economy. It would push up employment rates across all those areas where carers would be accessing. People would be happier and healthier and incur less costs to the NHS. It's common sense and we expect nothing less. Our message to the government, especially now as we approach the autumn budget, is don't blow it. Make your consultations work for the people who need, not those who greed. In the parlance of my dear departed daughter, tell you what, carers, right? We deserve better. Thank you for listening.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Jo. I think we can only take a couple of questions really as we're running a little bit behind, but maybe there'll be time at the end because I'm sure Jo will still be here then.
Thank you. Assuming that the government doesn't decide to pay all the carers £35,000 a year, do you have any immediate things that you'd like them to do to carers allowance to improve it?
I think the first thing that they can do is to stop means testing it, because every person who cares and is entitled to carers allowance is working over and above whatever they're doing in paid employment. So it shouldn't be means tested. And to be honest, if they're given it, part of it will be clawed back through tax and national insurance anyway. So.
Anyone else got a question for Joe? No. Well, Joe, it sounds like you've told us everything we need to know. Thank you so much.
Can I just say that if anybody wants any information about where I've got the statistics from, I've got a book with a number of the documents that I've been going through, and I also have a list of a few websites that you might be interested in looking at.
Thanks very much. Yeah, there is a carers group as well that people can join. If you get in touch with ESCaD, there are details on the postcards at the little stall over there. And please do use that to get in touch with us about any concerns you've got and anything you would like to join with us in. Thank you.
Hello, are we all ready to restart? Yes. Okay, thanks very much. We've got until 3:05, then you can have a slightly longer break. My name's Gordon Peters. I'm an ex-social services director, and also a long time before that, an ex-Nalgo Unison shop steward for social workers. I went from one to the other in the London Borough of Islington in the 1970s. I do want to say one thing about that before I open it out. I won't go over the technical issues. I think Jackie did that previously. I hope everybody pays attention to them and online, and if anybody wants to come and speak, they will have to sit down with the microphone. Is that correct?
No, just the speakers.
Sorry, they will have to come to the front and speak to the microphone from the floor. Thank you. Yeah, I support everything as a way of introduction to this session, which is more about how we can fight back, what we can do locally and in campaigns. I just want to say that I support everything Peter Beresford said, a long-time colleague I've known in the social care world. And one thing in terms of where we're starting from and where we might go, I just want to say two sentences. I joined local authority social services following the Act of Parliament which set them up in 1971-72. So I've been around in that world for quite a long while. And one of the things we had in Islington was, and across the country, a more or less universal social service, free at the point of use for most, if not all, of the activities required. That's how far we've gone backwards. And I was once a community social worker for 2,000 people, and there were community social workers for another 2,000 people, for everybody in the borough. I knew where these 2,000 people lived, and I knew the 170 or so who had real issues to deal with that we had to support. So nobody necessarily went without attention. That's how far back we have gone in something like 53 or 54 years. So it affects people like me very deeply to think that we're now in a position where we are beginning to fight back against the continual derogation of everything to do with people's welfare, which was once recognised by an Act of Parliament as a universal right, and it could be again. There was a lot less money around in 1971-72 than there is now in the political economy. So things can be reversed. We've done it before. We can do it again in the current circumstances. Right, it falls to me then, while chairing this session, to introduce, first of all, Steve North, whom I've known for a while and is an ex-president of my old union, Unison.
Thank you, Gordon, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference today, and thank you to the people who spoke already and the powerful testimonies that have been given. It's been really illuminating and really helpful, as these sessions always are, to hear other people's perspectives and experiences with the world of social care and support and independent living. As Gordon said, I'm a former president of Unison. I'm not going to dwell on that. But what I am going to talk about is my own experience working in social care and support, both working directly as a community care worker, but also then becoming involved as a trade unionist, and how trying to marry the two. In Salford, where I'm from, where I live, we have fought campaigns for quite some time, precisely to try and get back to something that, you know, I've never actually experienced, which is a genuinely compassionate and supportive and democratic and inclusive form of care and support within our communities, with some success, although clearly a huge way to go. So my first involvement, professionally at least, working in social care was when I became a community care worker in mental health, and that was in 2007. So I worked in that service, and we were charged with supporting people who'd been identified to us, and it was in line with a social care recovery model approach. The whole ethos was, you're not there to cure people, you're not there to fix people, you're there to work with people to give them the best possible standard of living based on how they want to live. And it was a wonderful experience for me to be able to be part of that. And I typically worked with young men. I was a young man myself at the time. I'm not so young anymore, but so I typically worked with young men who've been recently diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, and you could see that their horizons instantly lowered as a result of that diagnosis, that they felt they were being told that they were no longer safe, that they were now a danger to themselves, a danger to other people, that they wouldn't be able to work, they wouldn't be able to form relationships. These were the perceptions that had been reinforced by the media and by other people's understanding. And my job really was to say to them, that doesn't have to be that way, actually. This doesn't have to fundamentally change how you live your life. This illness is not going to go away, but actually with the right support, you can live a life that is as full as you want it to be. And it was a great experience. I worked in the community that I'd grown up in, and that was a fantastic few years that I was able to do that. And then in 2010, and I'm not going to pretend it was perfect before 2010, but in 2010, a government was elected in Westminster, and things started to change quite rapidly because austerity kicked in, and it kicked in hard. And I worked in a service that was jointly managed between the local authority, Salford City Council, and what was Greater Manchester West Mental Health Trust at the time. It's now Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust. And the cuts were presented, and instantly the view was, well, if we have to cut services, the social care services are the ones that are going to need to be cut. We can't cut the doctors, we can't cut the psychiatrists, we can't cut the community psychiatric nurses, we'll cut the support workers, because actually they're a luxury. And that was the attitude. And we knew, those of us who worked in those services, that the consequence of doing that would be devastating for the people that we supported. We also knew it didn't make sense financially. We knew we spent our days with people who were able to live in the community and live well in the community because of the support that they received. And if that support was taken away, we knew that there'd be an increase in hospitalisation. And obviously there is a massive human impact of that, but there is also a financial impact of it. It costs a lot of money to keep somebody in a psychiatric unit, and then to support them to come out, when actually with the right support in the first place, they can stay well. So we fought that battle, and we fought to protect social care services. And one of the things that I realised, I became much more, I was a union representative before that, but I became much more active at that point. And one of the things we recognised early on was we as staff, we as workers, we were not going to win this battle on our own. We were not going to win any of this on our own. And actually, nor should we try to. We were met, you know, our employer had a legal obligation to consult with us, but they didn't feel they had a similar obligation to consult with the people who we supported. And we were told in really patronising terms, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this, that we shouldn't tell people because we'd upset them. We shouldn't let them know what was coming because it would scare them. And actually, the kindest thing for us to do would be to sort of work with management to kind of pull the wool over people's eyes. And we weren't prepared to do that. We were not prepared to do that. And we were very honest, and we went to the groups of people supported, many of whom had formed into sort of collective groups as well. That initially were about peer support or organising social activities that then much more than that. And we said to them, look, this is what we've been told. This is what's coming. We need to fight this. As workers, we need to fight for our jobs. Of course we do. But actually, this is about so much more than that. This is about protecting the services that we all benefit from, you and us and the community. And we think there's things we can do, and there's things you can do. You know, we've got industrial strength. We're trade unionists. We can withdraw our labour. We can ballot for strike action. We can do all of these things. But we're also under a duty of care to our employers. So our ability to protest creatively is going to only extend so far, because, you know, we weren't going to ask our members to be reckless with their jobs. But actually, maybe there are things that you can do. And they recognised that, and they said, yeah, we can occupy council meetings. We can do all sorts of things. We can draw attention to this. And we worked together. And I'm not going to say we won every battle. We did not win every battle. And I'm not going to say we protected all the services, because we didn't, because we were up against a mighty weight of austerity. But we actually protected a lot of things that were lost in other local authority areas because we worked together. And that hit home to me. And I was elected our branch secretary shortly after that. You might say off the back of a lot of that work, actually. And coming into that role, it was always key to me that whatever services we had to fight for, and we had to fight for services every day, well beyond where I'd originally worked in mental health, we had to work with the people who relied upon those services for two reasons. One, they had a strength that we didn't. And secondly, they had a right to have a say over the services and the support that they received. And that, I recognised that from my experiences, and we took that in to those battles. And the other thing that became clear to me as well was that as trade unionists, we were servicing our members. We were treating them as individuals. You know, care workers would come to us and say, I've not been paid correctly for the last few months, and we'd support them as an individual, and we might get that money back. But ultimately, we weren't changing the structure. We weren't empowering workers. We were just plastering over a gap or a problem. And we knew a different approach had to be, and we learned a lot actually from the people that we'd supported about organising and coming together. And we started to apply an organising model to trade union long before it come back in vogue. Every trade unionist now, certainly within my union, talks about the organising model, but we were doing it at the early part of the last decade, and we were recognising that if we went to people working in social care, many of whom had been outsourced by this point, and said, look, collectively we can start to challenge some of the problems, but we've got to do it with the people that you work with. If we're going to be really successful, the people that you support, we might get somewhere. And we did, and we started fighting battles for pay improvements. And this was around the time that the Foundation Living Wage became something that people were talking about, a living wage foundation. We thought, do you know what? We want to make sure every care worker in Salford, every care and support worker in Salford gets the Foundation Living Wage. We want to do that, and we did. We won that. We became the first area in Greater Manchester, possibly the North West actually, to meet that threshold. And again, we didn't do it just as workers. We packed out public meetings that we effectively dragged politicians to, but we always made sure that there were people there. And the people we worked with and supported insisted that they were there to make the point that actually this helps us as well. So we worked very closely together. Coming into COVID, you know, fast forward a little bit, coming into the pandemic, we recognised that people working in social care had to choose between coming to work when they might be unwell or staying off work and not being paid. A lot of them would, through force of poverty, go into work. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to take that risk. These are people who every day were working with people in care homes and in supported living circumstances where they cared very, very deeply about the people that they were working with. But ultimately, these were minimum wage workers, or possibly foundation living wage workers, but still that wasn't very high. It's not a very high wage. Didn't have the savings, didn't have the ability. So we knew that from a public health perspective, we had to fight for proper support for people to be unwell, to be able to be off work without losing income. So we fought, and again, we made sure that the voice of the people that were support, because we knew potentially this might come to forms of industrial action, this might come to forms of service disruption. And if you work in social care and you get to that point, the first thing the press are going to throw at you, the politicians, is, oh, what about vulnerable people? What about the people that you're supposed to care about? I mean, it's a nonsense that those people, their hypocrisy would lead them to say those things, but we knew to expect it. So it was very clear to us that we had to make sure that the people we worked with and supported were on side, and we were involved with a group that was established at the time called Care and Support Workers Fight Back as well. And we fought for what became the Salford offer, which was the first package of support anywhere in the country where if you worked in frontline care and support, if you were off work for reasons related to COVID, not just if you had a positive test, because we didn't have testing by that point, but if you were off work because you had to need shield or somebody else in your family had to shield, or you'd been advised to do so for other health reasons, you would receive your full wage based on your average hours earned, not your contractual wage, because anyone who's worked in social care will know that actually your contractual wage might only give you 20, 25 hours a week, but you might need to work 50, 60 to actually make ends meet, based on your average wage. And we won that. And, you know, we're confident that saved lives. That saved lives in Salford because people were able to be unwell. But again, we did it through co-production. We did it through working together. And I guess that what we recognised that though is that even though the way we were able to implement that was by convincing the local authority in Salford and the NHS to make public money available to pay the cost of this, there were still private providers who, despite it costing them nothing, refused to implement it. Because their view was, well, okay, Salford Council and the NHS Trust in Salford are willing to make public money available to do this, but they aren't in Bury, they aren't in Manchester, and they aren't in Oldham. And if we put it in place for our workers here, then those workers over there are going to want it. So we could see firsthand the sort of logic of the private sector and how actually they would see something like this that cost them absolutely no money as something that might threaten their profit margins somewhere else. And that's where we really started to think more deeply about, well, actually, is the problem here the lack of money in the system? Clearly, there is a lack of money in social care and support. Or is it about ownership? Is it about where that money goes? Is it about who owns these things and who makes these decisions? But because we went through that experience together, and we always tried to do it in a collective and an organised way, bringing the people that we worked with and supported with us, we were able to take on that battle and start increasing demands to say, do you know what, we're interested in ownership, and we're interested in workers and people supported having a voice in that ownership. And we believe that this outsourced model is wrong. So insourcing then became very high on the agenda. And I'm really proud, actually, that in April next year, a huge amount of social care services in Salford will be coming back in-house to be delivered by the local authority. And as I'll come back to in a moment, that isn't perfect, because we know if we've not got a strong voice of people working in care and in receipt of care and support, that you haven't won the full battle. But that's a huge step forward for us. And then just the final thing I want to touch upon is the intersectionality and issues of race and gender, actually, in social care, because around the time we were coming out of the pandemic, what we then started to see was through the sponsored visa programme, with migrant workers coming into Salford and working in social care and being horrendously mistreated. You know, we encountered conditions that you could only describe as modern slavery, where people were being forced to work for no pay for hours and hours a week and told, if you don't do it, you'll lose your job, and if you lose your job, you'll get deported. But applying the same approach, it's the same approach all the time. It's a collective organising approach of speaking directly with workers and involving the people that they are supporting and their families to take this on. And we became, and another first we're really proud of as a result of that, we became the first local authority in the country to have our leaders sign Unison's Migrant Workers Charter, which said we will intervene as a council to protect against this exploitation where we find it. And if necessary, we will act as an employer of last resort. We would rather they were employer of first resort, but employer of last resort if a company folds or a company decides to collapse itself that is employing migrant workers. We will offer a guarantee that we will offer them a job so that they don't face deportation. And actually that creates something really interesting as well, because up until that point, the vast majority, still the case actually in Salford, that most of the people delivering care and support were white and white British and from Salford. And originally they perceived the migrant workers as a threat, but through some of these battles where we collectively improved pay and terms and conditions, you started to see those barriers being overcome. And I think that's a really interesting point for sort of wider society, that if you bring black and white workers, and we use the term black in Unison to describe people who have a heritage of colonial oppression in all its forms, if you bring black and white workers together, men and women together, you can overcome a lot of the barriers that the likes of Reform and others are trying to impose upon us in very practical ways. And Salford's not immune to those challenges, it absolutely isn't, but it shows an interesting and positive way we can overcome them. So for me, and I'll end on this, all of my experience of working in social care has largely been around local government. And I completely take the points that were made in the earlier session this morning, that local government delivering social care paid for through council tax is completely wrong. It's regressive, it's unsustainable, and we're seeing the consequences of that. So what I also say is my experience of having seen local government delivered social care and NHS delivered services is, the NHS is wonderful, and like all of you in this room, I would fight for it till my dying breath. But it can often feel very remote, very top down, and very unaccountable. And that's the experience that's often been shared with me by people who are supported, people in receipt of care and support, and that actually often feel done to by the NHS, because fundamentally the NHS is a health service. It's about fixing people, it's about curing people. I think there absolutely is a role for local government in the delivery of social care. I think it's not perfect, but the accountability and the structures that allow for that accountability are far greater than you will find in the National Health Service. We need to find a solution that doesn't have a postcode lottery as local government services often do, that is funded through progressive general taxation, that does provide the same guarantees of support and care for people wherever you might live within the country. But I think we also need to marry that with local models of delivery that are informed by people. And the local government model is not perfect. One of the reasons it's not perfect is because it's been starved of funding forever, for as long as it's existed. But where funding and resources are put in the right place, it can actually help present a form of accountable governance that, supported by workers organised in trade unions and people in receipt of care and support organised through groups such as this and elsewhere, it can be part of the solution, I believe. And my own union is pushing for a national care service. I don't think we put enough emphasis, actually, on the need for an accountable national care service that is rooted in local demand. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and I really look forward to hearing the other contributions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve, and particularly for mentioning the issue and sometimes the plight of migrant workers. We'd hoped to have somebody from the Pan-African workers here, but I don't think we could get them in the end. So it's very important to pay attention to that super exploitation, if you like, which is going on within social care. At which point, can I open it up to anybody from the floor or online who would like to come back? We got 5 minutes or more in that before I'm going to ask Anne to come in as the next speaker. One here and then one there. You have to come forward and use the mic. I'll give you the mic.
Very, very interesting what everybody said, and particularly for me, having been born in Salford, Steve, with the same name as you as well. But strangely enough, last night to actually be here, because I must be mad, but I live in London, you know, for what it's worth. Unfortunately, it's worth too much money. I stayed in a cheap hotel, you know, in Salford, actually near where I used to live. I'm sure you know Salford 7, Cliff Avenue, around there, next to the park. What's that park called? Sorry. Anyway, yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. Albert Park, exactly, yeah. So I stayed in this cheap hotel. Had a little wander around this morning, hobble around, not wander, hobble. And I saw, to my dismay, it's more than dismay actually, too many British flags on top of houses, which a lot of people would say, yeah, there's no problem with that. No problem with that. There is a problem with that when you put it in the context of a very large local Asian community, which I'm aware of, you know. So what your campaign in relation to migrants, I think is incredibly important. Thank you, sure. It's incredibly important. What really bothers me, and this is nothing very complex that I'm posing, or just want, we have to do our absolute utmost to make sure, this is incredibly serious, that reform do not get into power. Your campaign in relation to migrants, so important. For me, it begs the question, how much public exposure did it get? How much exposure in the mainstream media did it get? in the Manchester Evening News, on local news channels, if we are led down an increasingly stony road where reform gets into power, we're all F-U-C-K-E-D as far as I'm concerned. And this country will not be worth living in. I mean, that's how bad it is. What do we do? What do we do? That's a simple question.
Thank you. What do we do? We need that
Do you want to come straight back on that at the moment?
If you'd like me to, or I can take other questions and put
Well,
it together. It's however you want to do it.
Okay, well, let's keep the flow going if we can. Is there anybody up? Yes, there is. Joe.
Mine's a comment really more than anything else. There are 3 pillars in this movement towards an accountable national care support and independent living service. First of all, those who are in need of the services in order to live their lives to the fullest. Secondly, those who are delivering that support for free because their families or friends. And thirdly, the care workers who deserve a proper care living wage. And all 3 of them need to be involved in any discussions about how that service runs.
Thank you. There may be others to speak, but I know sitting here is Roy Willis from Ealing, and Ealing have done a lot of work on local social care initiatives, particularly in a sort of co-produced sort of way. So I'd like to give Roy at least a couple of minutes to say something.
You want me to come up to the platform?
It's okay.
Okay. Well, thanks to Gordon and the steering group for asking me to give a short report on the work of Ealing Reclaimed Social Care Action Group. I've decided to look back at the origins of the group as well as look forward to what we need to achieve locally in Ealing, and also by definition in terms of the national social care scene. The origins of the group are that in 2017, 2018, Ealing Save Our NHS was an energetic and very well supported campaign to save Ealing Hospital from closure. And that group decided that more attention needed to be paid to social care issues, and organised a meeting and publicity that's how the Ealing Social Care Group got formed, but also in existence. And as very important issue is a self-organised group of disability campaigners, the Direct Payment Action Group. And that group was allied with us, and they provided a core of activists to form our committee. And also on the committee were trade unionists, family carers, people with experience of working in social care and local authority services. So that blend of experience and knowledge is largely the same today, with some changes. The main areas of work that we have, that we soon realized that there was no one big issue like the closure of Ealing Hospital that would attract support locally in Ealing. That the closure of a day centre or the closure of a residential home wouldn't attract the same sort of support as a very unpopular local hospital. So we decided to work across a wide range of social care issues and build up research and evidence that the social care system in Ealing was broken, as in the rest of the country. Morale of the workforce was very low, and wholesale changes were needed, locally and nationally.
So in order to
another minute. So.
Okay, in order to achieve that, we set up our own website locally, and we've got a monthly newsletter, which is very well researched and well written. And I have to thank Maggie Byrne for that. And if anyone wants to subscribe to that newsletter, let me know. The ongoing work that we've built up has been meetings with the 3 local MPs and councillors on the Social Care Scrutiny Board, Scrutiny Panel, and the Health and Welfare Board. James Murray is one of our local MPs, who's now in the cabinet in the Treasury, from the Treasury Department. And no, he hasn't told me what's in the budget, and he hasn't told me what's not in the budget either. So we continually ask questions at these committees, and we've built up quite a range of issues that we've followed up, whether it's waiting lists, delayed assessments and reviews, unfair and punitive financial assessments, and the threat of court action. But one unusual area that we covered was the blue badges. We managed to get action, the theft of blue badges. We managed to get action from the police and the community safety teams to publicise this issue at council level, and in fact in the London Assembly. And I better move on.
Yeah.
So if you look at future plans, we need to prepare for and contribute to the Casey Commission report. We need to look at Ealing's plans for direct action, for direct payment expansion, and we're going to link with the direct payment users group to ensure that this expansion is properly resourced. There's 2 day centre closures coming up in Ealing next year, and we need to cooperate with the voluntary sector in looking at the options that are being offered. Partnership boards and co-production has been adopted by the council as their new model for consulting with care users. And we need to evaluate that and make sure it's not just a change of language, but a change of policy and procedures. Obviously, the local elections are coming up next year in London, in the London boroughs, and we need to look at manifestos and the commitments of the various parties. And we need to make sure that the London real living wage, which we achieved for domiciliary care workers, is extended to residential and daycare workers.
I think it was really important to have some of that feedback from Ealing, where I know a lot of stuff is going on, as Roy's explained, in terms of there are a lot of positive things one can do, no matter the very difficult times in which we are. So that's a good message, I think. There are 2 people online which I need to give a chance to. I hope they can be very brief, because Anne still needs some time to say what she has to say. First of all, Elaine Falloway.
Yes, hello. I used to live in Winchester, which was the home of Hampshire County Council. And we had a social services department, we had an education department. There wasn't an account that we didn't have. And I was asked to go to phone up elderly people and tell them that what they were receiving was going to be cut, because they used to be able to have, if they needed more than just one person to go in and help them in their home, then it was all paid for by the county council, but it was going to need to be cut to just one person, one social worker. Any other social workers that they were going to need, they would have to pay for. And so I had to ring them up and tell them and put this forward to them to tell them that this was going to happen. And I just felt awful about it, but I felt I needed to do it. It was, and it's so sad,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
For that, the other person who microphone's now is Joe Robinson. Microphone. Sorry,
Joe Robinson.
It's Jay Robinson. I'm actually currently in hospital in Birmingham, but in order to get back to pre-2010 levels, which weren't satisfactory, but they were a hell of a lot, thousands and thousands of pounds better off than what we are now. We need to be more proactive, not just as service users, but as carers, to support each other and to get involved in other campaigns so they can actually join us. We need to look at the elections next year and really make a move at pushing independent people forward who are going to make a stand for social care, for day centres, for paying people properly, for recognising the value of our workers instead of the value of their back pocket, which is the case of the politicians today. They don't really care about people on the front, and that is why they don't even look at the social model of disability anymore, nor the medical model of disability. The new model is the finance model of disability, where they can pay as little as possible, usually on quarters of an hour, 3 or 4 times a day, which is unsatisfactory. The overseas carers that have come over, I've had experience of a lot of them. They are absolutely amazing and worth their weight in gold. And they've actually filled up a gap because carers in the public sector and private sector were actually leaving the jobs because they couldn't make ends meet in it. And it's been met by mainly predominantly African carers. So I would say, as somebody who has been active in campaigning, I would say, get out there, get your guns. Sylvia Pankhurst came from Manchester. Follow her example.
Thank you very much, Jane. Much appreciated. Can I give Steve a minute or so to come back on the question that was asked? And then I have to hand it over to Anne.
Yeah, I'll be really quick, because, I mean, I first just want to say, Joe, I completely agree, and that's been my experience, actually. More, actually, through children's services of working with people who are caring for children, protect services than with adult services. But again, it's morally right, but it's also practically right as well. We collectively, we are far stronger. On your question, Steve, look, obviously that's a huge issue, isn't it? And I think the battle against racism in the far right has got to be fought in many ways. It's got to be fought on the streets, it's got to be fought in elections, it's got to be... But I think there is something particularly powerful about bringing workers together. I remember years ago watching a documentary about the miners' strike and a group of Welsh miners going to Birmingham because they've been offered support by the Sikh community in Birmingham. And these miners were very open that, you know, they had racist views before that. They were distrustful of people who weren't from the same background as them. And when they went to Birmingham and they saw the support and they saw the common cause against Thatcherism with the Sikh community in Birmingham, it opened their eyes. And I've seen that happen directly in our social care campaigns. I've seen white working class Salford, you know, women mainly, who carry the prejudices in many cases that a lot of people unfortunately have because of what's reinforced through the media and through politicians and what they say, totally change their views when they've worked and campaigned alongside female care workers from Africa or the Indian subcontinent. You know, I do think that is a huge part of how we tackle racism in a really practical way. We've got a long way to go, but I've seen firsthand just how powerful that can be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve. There may be others who want to contribute, but I feel in the time we've got left, it would be unfair not to give Anne the chance now for our at least 8 or 9 minutes.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Could we bring up my slide pack? I may not speak to it very much, but if we bring up the first slide so that people can see it. Yeah.
Just give me a second, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Nearly there.
So thank you for inviting me. I came to ESCaD originally to learn, and I learnt many things. Jo in particular, her story was an amazing impression for me, and got a page in the book I wrote about the social care crisis. I was later asked to contribute in a research way, and we had a workshop earlier this summer on non-profit care providers, which I think are an important aspect of local action, which is what this session is meant to be about. We looked at three kinds: co-ops, micro-enterprise, and local authority trading companies. Social enterprise is a term which is sometimes used for either the local authority ones or independent non-profits. And in lobbying for better care, I think it's useful to know how these compare with private agencies, how we could develop local action to increase the range of non-profit providers available, and stop the privatized agencies from dominating the field. So what are the advantages of non-profits and what are the disadvantages? These are some of the things I want to speak to. First of all, what do we mean by non-profit? It's about not being profit-driven. The agencies want to make money. Non-profits want to make a surplus, which every business needs for investment and for a reserve, but they're not driven by the need for profit. Some people would say that not-for-profit means non-profit distributing, but then we have things like housing associations where the very large salaries paid to some managers may be a form of profit in disguise. Next slide, please. Thank you. So of the three forms, first let's look at co-ops. Some do have shareholders, but this is really just a way of raising money cheaply from public subscription. And I think co-ops are the home of quality care as an objective. We hope to have equal care to speak to today. I think they are a model of their kind. Unfortunately, they couldn't come. But I will also mention Possibilities in Rochdale. When the workers for Possibilities left the council in 2014, they were looking very much at better quality services and more user control, as well as higher pay for themselves. So these, I think, are the drivers of cooperative care. Some make profits, some very low margins, some very high margins. And where they make a good profit, this is a chance for them to grow and expand. And this, I think, is what we want to see. Next slide, please. The second form of care that we looked at in the non-profit field is micro-enterprise. What is that? It's basically self-employed individuals or small groups of workers who come together as partnerships or small companies. Many local authorities have been helped to set this up by a community development organisation called Catalyst. And it's well worth looking at Catalyst's website, looking at the kind of things that they do. A huge array of micro-enterprises that have been founded in many places, offering a lot of choice for local people, but also the possibility that there may not be a sufficient array of things for people to choose from, because it's basically what the micro-entrepreneurs want to set up. Catalysts do employ very strong quality control in what they do. They have a list of standards that people are meant to subscribe to, instructions about registration and CQC inspection and things like that, which I think are very helpful and important. Some of the workers who set up in micro-enterprise may have worked for an agency and want more security or more money, but basically they often want to deliver better quality care for their clients. And I think the important thing about this is that if they are experienced care workers, they've chosen to stay in a sector that is basically very underpaid. Other people in micro-enterprises may have been ex-volunteers and moved from volunteering to a form of part-time paid work. So I think a possibility that we should look at is that these are people who are very concerned about quality control and giving users control over what happens. And this personal relationship between the care worker and the user is, I think, very important in the context of our strong emphasis on co-production. Next slide, please. So the advantages of micro enterprises and very small profit, non-profits in general, are, I think, that self-direction by individual care workers means that they can be more responsive to clients' preferences and needs. We avoid this rather tick box culture that you get in privatized agencies, where what they do for each client is very much up to the manager and not the client. Follow the care plan, tick the boxes, go away quickly, and don't have time to chat, don't have time to find out what someone really wants from day to day, which is obviously what we need. Whereas self-employed workers work directly with their client and with the family carers, if there are any, and this, I think, is very important, that there is no intermediary, and therefore that helps to create a direct and very humanized relationship. But they do need direct payments or personal budgets. So I think we need to look at the problems that people have in setting up direct payments or personal budgets, and how councils could help do that better, help people understand the paperwork, make the paperwork lighter for them. I'll come back to that shortly. How much does it actually save money to have non-profits? Cutting out shareholders saves some money. Are we on to the next slide? Yeah. Advantages of non-profits. Yeah. Okay. Cutting out shareholders saves some money, but the most important issue is there is government underfunding of social care. And until we get that right, there isn't much liberty to improve quality control. And you have all the time this interplay between, do we pay the workers better, do we give more people social care that they need, or do we improve quality and depth of what is provided? That is a very real conflict. And this is, I think, particularly an issue in the case of residential care, where the operating arm is often squeezed by another part of the company group, which has got hold of the real estate and charges a huge mortgage or a huge rent, and squeezes the operating arm so that it then turns around to the local authority and says, we can't make enough money. So I think one important point there is that profit-driven care homes reduce staff during the pandemic, whereas the non-profit homes increase staff. Very important issue. I'll skip the next slide because we've dealt with personal budgets as a barrier, something that people can, I think, deal with at local level within their councils. So the main route to making care cheaper, I think, is via improving quality. Outcomes-based commissioning is very much part of that. This means defining the care plan in terms of what the client wants to achieve, not just a task list which is determined by a manager. It's what you want from day to day. It's what the family carers advise the care worker someone needs. And that may change from day to day, from week to week. So they've got to be flexible. And lots of things actually get left out because of the pressure to make a profit. So for better quality and co-production with service users, you need highly motivated people who are committed to a real human relationship with the client. And that, I think, is the most important thing about non-profits. Come now to the slide number 8, care enterprises set up by local authorities. Here, I think there were some caveats. I mean, Steve may have some comments on this. We found about 20 local authority trading companies in social care, and often, unfortunately, they were set up to save costs when in-house provision was more widespread. They were seen as a form of outsourcing, and there was a report by the Labour Research Department for Unison that said they often squeezed workers' pay. In principle, it could have been otherwise, which were what Gordon and I were hoping for in Haringey. Gordon wrote a pamphlet about this a while ago, and we tried to get the council to take it forward, but they didn't. But I think, you know, this is something which we need to look at. So basically, local pilots of some form of non-profit care are a very important thing to look at. And how do we take that forward? Next slide, please. What kind of non-profit care and how to take it forward? Councils, I think, can best contribute by stimulating non-profits and contracting with them rather than founding them. They can help small care enterprises and self-employed individuals to come together for joint bids in competitive tendering. And I'm pleased to say that Manchester is or was trying to do that. Also, I think very, very importantly, particularly in the light of what Steve said about migrants, councils need to be persuaded to pay for training, whether it's in non-profits or in-house, or even in the private agencies. Migrant workers may need familiarisation training, they may need cultural adaptation training, they may need help with understanding what the client wants in linguistic terms, so somebody needs to pay for that. So I think micro-enterprise actually is not just about self-employment, it's also about a form which is flexible, where people can come together and work in groups, and councils can help them to do that. So maybe a few self-employed individuals might come together as a partnership or even form a co-op. And the larger something gets, the more likely it is to survive. So councils can help that along. And lastly, I put up a few resources which you can get on the slide pack when it's circulated if you want to look up this sort of thing further. So thank you very much for listening. And I'll just mention also that Equal Care have an amazing website. I definitely recommend you look at it as a model of what non-profits can do. I'd also suggest that you look at the handout which I prepared on local charges and the problems with them, and the problem of debts on social care charges. Because we were going to have a speaker on that, namely Helen Rowlands. Unfortunately, she couldn't come, but I did do a handout on it which you can pick up on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne. And can I put in a plug for Anne's book? She's written a book on social care, what's happened to it, and how it could be different and better. So you can buy that before you leave, because it's in the room somewhere. Yeah. So I think it's worth me plugging that. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to 10 past, but and I think we do need to have a break before the next session. But if there's anybody bursting to come in response, I think it's only fair to ask that now. Gentleman over here.
Very quick. Government, well, people generally often think that markets are the solution to every problem, particularly about quality. I'd like to know what the panel thinks about that idea.
Markets of choice.
Thank you. I think one needs an array of different sources of care. There's a slight danger that if it's only the council, there might be bureaucratisation and lack of choice, but co-production is where it needs to go. And I think, you know, the idea in the Care Act that there should be a market is actually quite a dangerous one, because people who need care are in the last position to behave like Adam Smith's ideal consumer. They are in crisis, they are desperately in need, they don't feel they have much choice, they're stuck in bed, possibly, and, you know, totally dependent on someone coming in every day and doing things for them. And they dare not offend that person or that person's employer. So basically we need advocates, we need co-production, we need people to protect this whole system. And I was in a meeting in Haringey a couple of days ago where someone said, basically, every person in need of care, receiving care or giving care needs support, needs advocates, needs support from the community, needs a service that they can turn to as backup. I mean, a lot of what Joe said was very relevant to this. And I'll go into this a bit in the next session as well. Thank you.
Can I have a review on that, or is there someone else wanting to speak?
I can give you 30 seconds and one more speaker.
Well, just, I have never seen an example of the market improving quality. I've never seen a single one. I've never seen a service taken out of public delivery, given to the market in social care and made better as a result of it. And I think, unfortunately, what we have seen is where we've seen examples of the types of initiatives that Anne describes, they often then become subject to the whims of the market. They need to compete with the market in order to survive, and they suffer in quality as a result. So my preference has been public delivery, but I do absolutely recognise that one of the consequences of that can sometimes be bureaucratisation. That's why we need a strong voice for workers, people supported, and carers. That has to be built, but I've never seen the market make any of it any better, ever.
My short answer is room for the market, but not defined by the market, regulated and controlled at the very least. I think there is one other mic at the back, one if you speak, then we probably really do need to break. Am I correct, Brian?
Yes. Thanks, and thanks, Anne, for presenting that, because I think the whole question of non-profits and micro-enterprises is interesting. I just wanted to really debate it a little further, because, as you know, we've had a discussion about where I live, which is Suffolk, and the county council there is very keen on micro-enterprises. Traditional Tory county council. So why are they very keen? They don't have to do anything other than take credit for actually having done very little indeed. And the whole issue of micro-enterprises seems to me, you know, yes, you're getting right away from the horrible private equity companies and asset strippers and all these rogues that are running care. You're able to create bespoke care, personalized care, personal relationships, all very good. However, the question of consistency and continuity, that is why we have a state, an enabling state, so that we can continue to provide in good times and bad, and over time. And my concern is that micro-enterprises, you know, people who are delivering them, something happens in their lives, they move on. So it's that lack of permanence. You talked about the need for training being sponsored by local authorities. I think more than that, there needs to be a bringing together of this individual initiative, you might call it entrepreneurism, and a structure which can ensure that it endures and grows.
Thanks, Mike. My answer to that is a national social care and independent living service which can set the parameters for where the market can be used and where it has to be put in its place. Yeah? I think that is what we need. So, at which point I think we've gone at least 5 minutes over, so I do think we have to break. Thank you very much to everyone. Sorry we didn't have one or two of the speakers online from migrant workers particularly. We did cover that in both our speakers here as best we could. Thank you very much indeed. There's a lot happening locally across the country. I think that was something we wanted to say. My last word is I'd like the Newcastle City Council talk about an adult social care and preventive directorate plan in which adults in the city are supported to live the lives they want to live. It's good to see a city council that actually puts that up front rather than all the technical jargon which so often goes with social care and excuses for why they can't do things. So let's fight back. We've had, I think, a good session on what some of the local possibilities are. There are many more, and next time we meet, let's hope that we're much further on with this campaign. Thank you.
This last session is about the fight, core of our campaign, which is the fight for a national care support and independent living service. And we have 3 contributions here. We have Anne going first, Anne Gray, the author of the book that we're advertising, who is going to, in a sense, pick up perhaps where Peter Beresford started us off. So we're coming round full circle to looking to a radical reimagining of care and support, which challenges the whole system and isn't just sort of substituting what we've got now for a public version of what we've got now, which would nowhere near be good enough. She will be talking generally about that. Anna Rose here is going to make a comment after that, adding on to the way the current system works and some of the ways we have to fight back. Brian is going to speak, I think, mainly about the funding side of it, and that a radically reimagined, different way of doing things is possible. And Rebecca Long-Bailey, who couldn't come in person, has kindly done us a video, and we'll then finish with her video. Then if you can just bear with us for about 10-15 minutes after that, Brian's just going to try and pull out a few strands from the conference for going forwards, and I'm going to look at some of the practical stuff we're doing in the future as ESCaD and how you can get involved. So I'll just introduce, this is Anne. She's using the slides. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to be very brief. Peter Beresford was a hard act to follow. I think he inspired us a lot about the need for co-production, about the need for democracy, two things which we basically do not have in today's care system. So, three questions here. How can we get public support for our demands? Who are our allies in that quest? And what details do we need in our various asks of the government, the system, to convince the government and indeed local government to act? On next slide, please. Thank you. Convincing the public and the voters. I think one of the biggest things that we can say is it is a risk for you and your family. The need for care is so extensive that 2/3 of us will be carers at some point in our lives. Over 10% of people over the age of 85 use some form of care and support, but a whole lot more, maybe 1 in 5 of the population over 65, have some unmet need for social care. This is evidenced by things like the English Longitudinal Survey of Aging. 45% of people over 65 have disabilities. 2/3 of those over 85 have disabilities. 11% of children, and the proportion is rising, and almost 6% of those have learning disabilities. So they can't speak for themselves very often, which I think is important. And of the working age adults, more than a fifth have disabilities of some kind. So as Peter said at the beginning, the incidence of disability is rising in our society at a horrendous rate. The proportion of older people is rising at a very large rate. So what we need is to widen the circle of support, make sure people look after each other, as he said, big emphasis on mutual aid, as well as on better state services. And I think for this we need an inspiring vision, and we need a concept of a caring society or a caring economy. And if you don't have time to read my book, you should definitely read this one, The Care Manifesto by the Care Collective. Little volume from Verso, now about 5 years old, which inspired me enormously in my writing, and I hope it will inspire you. And next slide, please. The concept of a caring society, which is inclusive, supportive, shares the load of family carers with friends and neighbours, and in particular attends to those who have no family carer. This is really important. What are the foundations of that? Well, the Care Collective identified 4 things: mutual support, public space, which is accessible to everyone, parks, public buildings, transport, should be accessible to everyone. That greatly improves the quality of life for people who have mobility problems and several other issues. Shared resources and local democracy. And what that means, I think, is radical municipalisation and cooperatives, rebuilding the public sector, and, if possible, insourcing its caring and welfare activities. So when we talk about mutual support, when we talk about the load being carried by the whole community, that is not just about doing things for your neighbour. It is actually pushing forward the case for better state services. That is really important. Let us not fall into the big society trap. Let us not say it's all outsourceable to voluntary organisations. No, voluntary organisations are desperately important. Sharing the load informally between friends and neighbours is desperately important, but it must not take the place of state services. And I think we need to use this idea of broadening the caring circle through mutual support as a way to familiarise people with the needs of carers and cared for people and people who need care and haven't got it. And once those needs are better understood and knowledge about them is spread, it will be that much easier to convince voters and politicians of the need for what we actually need to have, which is a better state care service. And in that connection, okay, the population is growing older, but more and more of those people have no relatives available to support them. Fewer people are having children. I was 81 last week. I have no children. What am I going to face in 5 or 6 years' time? Of those children that are available in theory, many of them, as somebody pointed out earlier, live hundreds of miles from their aging parents. And so this is a real issue about support needing to be broadened beyond the family. And I think that's definitely what we have to do in an informal way, as well as press for better state care. Next slide, please. So a few ideas about how to fund it all. I'll leave this slide up for a few minutes so you can take it in. Prem Sikka is full of good ideas. Wonderful speaker, if we could ever get him. The TUC have called for a wealth tax. Many other people have called for a wealth tax. Is the government ever going to do it? Rachel Reeves has her sights on higher income tax for everybody. No, no, please. Tax the wealth. Tax the big corporations. Limit tax reliefs on wealthy people to the standard rate of income tax, even if they actually pay a much higher rate on the top slice of their income. Next slide, please. I'll skip the economic benefits of expanding care because I think Brian has a lot to say about that. But I will say that a pay rise for care workers, which we badly need, as Steve was pointing out, means less universal credit being paid out. So that's another little benefit to add to the bag. Next slide, please. So what can local councils do beyond actual social care budgets? I would urge people to look at the concept of age-friendly communities, which I think help younger disabled people as well as frail seniors. And I know that Manchester and Leeds are both model examples of this concept of an age-friendly community, an age-friendly society. It's all coordinated by the Centre for Aging Better, which has a wonderful website with lots of resources in it, lots of local case studies that people can draw upon. And these 77 or more local authorities try to make the physical and social environment inclusive, respectful and supportive, which in turn helps reduce the need for care services. Co-production is absolutely crucial, which means providing structures for seniors and disabled people to have an effective local voice. And I think, we can't divide younger disabled people from older. I invited one lobbyist for a national older people's organisation to this conference, and he said, "Oh, you always leave older people out of the picture to the last minute. The younger disabled people are stealing the scene. It's all about them." I said, no, their needs are very similar and their needs overlap. And we look at people who are caring for children who couldn't leave home, who have care needs themselves, into their late older age. We look at people with disabilities growing old, particularly likely to have no children. And what do we see? We see a conglomeration of needs which are all very similar. So let's go for that. So we need premises for things like carers hubs, lunch clubs, community groups and activities. And we need a good range of supported housing and old people's housing options. And I think all of those are encompassed within the idea of age-friendly communities which help younger disabled people too. Who should provide care? Last slide, please. I think there are two things we need to do here. Grow a non-profit sector as a series of pilots which one day might link up to a national service or be taken in-house or complement in-house services to give more choice. We need to reduce the load on family carers with a load of things that paid care workers can't do and don't do, including, very importantly, helping with bureaucracy, helping to navigate the system, helping to unblock connection with the services that people need. And as people gain knowledge, they can press for better services. And that's what we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant, and it was really good to hear that we're not just fighting for care and support, but for better housing, better leisure facilities, community spaces, and all of that, which is a fight for all of us. So it helps with the argument about this is for universal services. It's not silos. And so just, have we got anybody? I would like to, shall I bring in Anna now? She asked if she could put her hand up. So rather than put your hand up, can I just, oh yeah, do you want the mic over there?
Yes.
Thank you, Anne. I think that shows what could be done, which is what we're desperate for. And I'd liked your reference to the fact that some people who need care can't actually speak for themselves. That's a group that's very, very neglected. And I'd like to put out a plea to anyone on this call, or anyone that people on this call know who might be interested in joining Joe Walton, who spoke earlier, and myself, who in the new year are going to start looking at harms and avoidable deaths that happen to people in the care system. Because this is a really important area. I don't think the public is aware of just how much can go seriously wrong, and the incredible economic cost. I mean, there's the personal cost. My son lost his life due to an accident that should never have happened in a nursing home, and he had been harmed by the people who ran his home several times during his life. I should also point out that he had some wonderful carers. Sometimes in his life things were right, he had fantastic people working with him, and he could be who he was, and that was just incredible. Sadly, when systems go wrong, people suffer. And so what we want to do is to sort of begin to look at the kinds of harms, the amount of harm, if we can somehow get to the bottom of that. I think there's quite a bit known about the numbers dying in the care system, and it's quite shocking. It's probably hundreds over the last few years. But we need to nail that and actually get some facts and figures for it. So if anybody on the call is interested, or anyone on the call who knows anyone who might be interested to join us, we would be absolutely delighted, because it's quite a big job. It's an interesting job, and we would really, really welcome any input from anyone willing to join us. Just get in contact with ESCaD if you're interested, and we will be given your details. Thanks very much.
Sorry, I didn't really realise we've only got one mic. I think we're meant to have a roving mic. Does anybody in the room want to ask anything? Just show their hands, because I've got two, I think, one in the chat and one, oh no, not one. Okay, somebody in the chat. Do you want to shout up?
It's a question, really. The social care system in Scotland is not quite the same as it is in England. They do say that they have a national care service. I'm sure it's not perfect. Do we think it's better than what we've got?
I think the Scottish system is used as a model in many instances, but it does have deficiencies. It is only for personal care, which is basically what I call the bedroom and bathroom bits. It does not cover things like meal preparation, which one person I know has had enormous trouble with, because despite the fact it's in her care package, the workers basically just don't do it. I mean, meal preparation for them means getting a box out of the fridge and putting it into the microwave, and that's about it. Whereas she's a person who likes lots of fresh vegetables, and that's not available as far as they're concerned. I think there are lots of other things that the community can do to help along people who need their fridge tidying or their curtains hanging or a light bulb changing, all these little things that a householder who is very able can do for themselves, but care workers never do. And, you know, if we were to have a care service that did all of those things, it would be a miracle. I don't think that's going to happen. But we do need something broader than what the Scottish system is providing at the moment. And, okay, people can get these other things, but they have to pay for them. And I've just mentioned the Welsh system, which I think is better in some ways, that they simply put a cap on the amount of money you would have to spend on care per week. This cap could be defined in hours rather than in money, which is it at the moment. It can be extended gradually as things improve. And in theory, it could be spent on lots of other things, depending on what you want, not just the bedroom and bathroom bit. So all of these things, I think, are to be considered. Thank you.
I'll just mention thanks on the chat to Ava Macaulay and Jean Smith, who said they would be interested in helping around the issue of harms and getting an article together. And we will get the emails of those on the Zoom who said they would like to keep in touch. So we will contact you. Thank you very much. And we have a question in the chat, I think. Is it or in person from Jay Robinson? Is Jay there, or are we having it in the chat?
I'm online.
Hello.
Hello.
Carry on.
Me back again. About 12 years ago now, I was chair of the Direct Payments Forum in Birmingham, and we compiled a proposal that we put to the director and also to the cabinet member, which was based around a TMO ALMO system, so almost like co-op. And the proposal was having like an arm's length company from the council, but obviously still connected to the council, where you would have social work staff, service users, and also a number of suitably qualified persons who may have interest in developing a really good social services provider. And we had people there who could provide training, people there who could provide bookkeeping help, people there who had the economic, brains in order to help people know how to best use the budgets that they had to purchase care. We also proposed sort of like helping people interview carers, which is a big, stop. But anyway, it was quite an all-inclusive proposal. Unfortunately, Birmingham City Council is a bit stuck in the mud, and it still is stuck in the mud. And it didn't really get anywhere, but it would have saved them a lot of money. And there's a lot of good points about the ALMO models, as long as you don't get taken over by too many professionals from the council side. And it is balanced, with the professionals, so to speak, and those who receive services under carers, etc. That was just something we had wanted to get off the ground in Birmingham.
Thank you, Jay.
Birmingham's not the best council.
Very useful, and thank you, and relevant to the other session too. I'll just pass this to Anne to see if she wants to comment.
I don't want to comment very much, except I think this touches on the need for advocacy and also the need for navigation of various services, help given to people to show them what they can have, what they can choose, what they can't have, what they should do about it if they can't have it, and also the need to give people help with managing and setting up personal budgets or direct payments so that they have more choice about the way their care is handled from day to day and the tasks that are covered. All of those things are very helpful. There may be many ways of delivering them. Thank you.
I think we can take one more question or contribution. Do you want to come in before we have Brian? We'll have Brian and then we have Rebecca Long Bailey's video. Thanks. It's Steve again, isn't it?
Thank you. Unfortunately, it's more of a hopeful, positive observation than a question. I apologise for that. I just think it's fantastic that we had Jay just speaking, because she's in a hospital bed, right? Some people would say great, but the negative, the sort of people who are trying to ruin things would say, keep her in a hospital bed. She can be quiet there. She can't interfere with the situation that radically needs changing. However, this is a conference involving people in hospital beds who can't be here physically, but mentally they are here. Because with this unanimity, with this one-minded approach, with a single physical approach, I don't know, uniphysical or whatever you want to call it, it's about one body, it's about one entity working as a whole. Because we're all aware that divide and rule, the old story, the old horrible trick of nation against nation, it just, in the long term, leads to a zero-sum game, leads to zero, leads to nothing, leads to the end, right? But with Jay in the bed, with the speakers at the front, with people online, we've got a single approach, a unified approach. And when you have a unified approach, you don't have reform getting in, like just spewing vile rhetoric. And, you know, we know what the answer is. It's a unified approach.
Thank you for that. We'll just go straight on to Brian, if that's okay. And I have a few questions after him, and then we'll have a video. Brian, he could introduce himself. Brian Fisher's been involved with ESCaD from the very beginning, when we were Naxils, and before that, Reclaim Social Care, and is on the steering group of ESCaD.
Thanks. What I want to talk about is the money side of things. So when we talk about the sort of fabulous transformed system that we all want to see, we can imagine Treasury officials, MPs saying this is completely unaffordable, this is just pie in the sky, there's no way that the country could afford something like this. And I want to make the case that that is not true. So if I could have the next slide again. Just to remind us all, we have talked about it quite a lot, off and on, but just to summarize what we want to see, we want to see a national care, support and independent living service. So that involves co-production and independent living as a central feature of the kind of social care we want to see. Fully funded through government investment, progressive taxation, free at the point of need and fully available to everyone. Publicly provided, publicly accountable. Mandated nationally, that means with standards that are defined at the centre, but delivered locally so that it's something that will fit with the local scene, the local ecology, and that informal carers will be completely central to all of this, with a community, family and friends being very much involved in the way that social care would be delivered in those local places. A national employee strategy fit for purpose, so Labour is doing a very small amount in that regard, but we want employees to have a proper terms and conditions, proper training, proper development. And finally, to support the formation of a task force on independent and supported living. So that's what we're after. That's the unified vision that we want to see. Just remember that. So it's not just the same, but without privatisation, it's a very different kind of service. Next slide, please. So the current cost of adult social care is that, 28 billion a year. And next slide, please. If we just did nothing, which is what we're doing at the moment, there are huge hidden costs to this stasis that we have now. So, and most of these have actually been mentioned through the day. So, disabled people can't work as well as they should do, carers can't work as well as they should do, we don't retain enough staff, there's a huge cost to the NHS which can't discharge people, and there are profits that are siphoned off to companies that are running residential homes primarily, but also other parts of the system. And I mean, these are all very difficult calculations to make. We've looked at the best evidence we can. They can all be challenged, no doubt, but that is a cost now to the system of about £26 billion. So that more or less the whole cost of social care. If we change those things, we would be eliminating those costs. So moving on to the next slide, this is the sort of thing that if you just look at the costs of free social care, based on independent living, proper funding for staff, free domiciliary care, free residential care, and so on, including direct payments, the extra cost would be 41 billion. I mean, that is a lot of money, no doubt. And we can't say that it would be cheap to do this. Next slide, please. But there are huge benefits that come out of this. This is an investment. We know that for every pound that's invested in health and in social care, you actually get somewhere between £5 and £7 back. So this is not just a cost, it's an investment. So as it's been mentioned, you get increased earning, you get increased taxation from the extra benefits that employees are getting. They don't get salted off into tax havens somewhere, they get spent locally. And even now, there's a huge contribution of adult social care to to the Treasury, to the extent of about £40 billion. That's part of this return on investment that I was talking about. If you bring the money back from the private sector, it's a relatively small amount in this sort of huge sums that we're talking about, 1.5 billion, and the NHS discharges that we would be able to solve would save enormous amounts of money. So this whole cost, seeming enormous cost that we're talking about, is offset by huge other savings in the total economy. And what Rachael Reeves ought to be looking at is the total economy. And this is a perfectly affordable thing for us to do, even if you think within conventional economics, you think about this as a cost and you think about this as an investment, it's still perfectly doable. Next and final slide. So this is something we can do, this is something we must do, and it is something we want Casey to take seriously, we want the government to take it seriously. It is all possible and we must fight for it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Have we got any questions in the room or contributions? Olivia.
It's a very simple question, Brian, something I don't really understand because I haven't been to a lot of these meetings. What does the economic contribution of adult social care to England, 50.3 billion, mean? I don't know what it is.
what we're talking about is the ability for people to stay at home, not get admitted to hospital, that they can still relate to their families, they can still, many people can work. If you're looking at disabled people who are still of working age, it enables them to stay independent. So if we didn't have a social care system, none of these things would be possible. So social care is very different to the NHS. The NHS fixes people, put them back. What social care should be trying to do is to keep people as independent as possible.
There's a few others want to speak. Can we take anyone who hasn't spoken first? No? Okay, we'll just go around the room. Sylvia. Oh, sorry. Next to Anna, and then we'll go Sylvia and then Mike, if that's okay.
Hi, I would just like to know, my son's in social care, and last year he was supposed to be getting about 18 hours of one-to-one, which he was very lucky if he got more than 2. And I asked social services, I says, what is happening to that money? Because it came to about 60,000 quid by the time I totted it up, and they've brushed it under the carpet. So he's now been reduced to, his hours have been reduced right down to 8, of which he's still only getting 1 or 2. So they're still sweeping this money under the carpet. Is there anything that anybody can do anywhere that stops them from doing that? Because I'm sure I can't be the only one.
You want to take 1 or 2 and then come back? There was Sylvia and Mike wanted to speak. Sylvia just there, to your left. Sorry. Can we try and keep them short?
Hello, I'd just like to question the definition. Should include that all services should be accessible according to all carers. In Leeds, service users and carers can't ring the mental health crisis line. Non-related carers won't be consulted on the 111 service to the police station, and a 111 service for health. No police station has an open desk, or social care office has an open desk. The right care, right person policy that has been brought in for mental health by the police excludes that.
Next, if you don't mind, Mike, we'll just to mix it about. There's somebody on the Zoom. We'll take Mark Lines. If you're there, Mark, we'd love to hear from you on the Zoom. And then Mike at the back. Thank you.
Yeah, just to point a couple of points really. I think if we were to make an argument around the waste of the NHS and the money that is wasted on different projects of the NHS, and that if we could do some research into that, then I'm sure social care will be affordable then. So and also a related issue, but not directly related, is to get involved in minimum income, universal minimum income. If we could get that in this country, I'm sure a lot of people will be willing to put, if they've got the right amount of income, they will be willing to contribute more. So those are 2 indirect issues that have been all related to the care issue as well.
Yeah, I think that last suggestion about the universal minimum wage is something we should look at. But I just wanted really, thank you, Brian, for your very succinct summary of the cost benefits of this. I just wanted to add to that, for people who are interested, to read some of the things, some of the essays and some of the articles Professor Prem Sikka has written because they are extraordinary. They're succinct and they are very punchy, and they all give added beef, really, to Brian's points.
Just to add to what I said earlier, I talked about the personal cost to somebody who is harmed and obviously if they are killed. But there's also an unbelievable financial cost to harming and killing people. If you harm them, they often have problems afterwards that they didn't have before, and that means more care needs, and which costs money. Where people die avoidably, there are colossal costs involved in coroner's courts, sometimes other kinds of legal follow-up, and in the whole legal apparatus that goes mainly to support the organisations who are at fault, but sometimes, if you're lucky, the families of the person who's died. Those costs, I don't know if anyone has done any costings on it, but it would be very, very interesting if they did, because I think they're probably absolutely enormous and avoidable.
Yeah, so just to say to your point about what's happening to your son, this is an example of what Jay from her hospital bed, I mean, I just want to salute Jay from your hospital bed. That is just amazing that you're here with us. The text's pretty amazing, but you are just amazing to contribute from there. Thank you very much. I mean,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I'm originally from Manchester, so I've got the Manx spirit.
I mean, what you're describing is her finance model of disability. That's a phrase I will now steal and use in many different contexts. So, I mean, from a local authority's point of view, I think the people that are making these decisions probably want to do the best possible for your son, but cannot. There are just enormous limitations that have been placed on them by government, and it is very, very difficult for them to operate better. But
I think it's partly the fact that last time I spoke to the
hang on, sorry. So
he said just ignore it.
well, it is a terrible situation, and we all want to change it, I think. There was one other question that I think was more addressed to you, because it was on the sheet that you'd circulated, which I didn't know how to answer.
Sorry, my attention is flagging. Can you remind me what that was? Yeah. I think maybe for lack of time we should deal with this privately afterwards if you want to stay around for a chat. Yeah.
We've got to the video now. Is there anybody else on the Zoom wanting to pop in? Because we're just going to close this bit in a minute. Do you want to say any closing words, or was that it, Brian? Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm sorry I can't be there with you today in person, unfortunately, but I hope you're having a fantastic event. Now, there's no two ways about it. We need to have a national care, support and independent living service. It should be free at the point of need and fully available to every single person living in this country. And we need it because over the last couple of years, I've been supporting my parents. They're at that time of their life where they need a little bit of extra support. And I've been shocked at how dire the situation is in social care. And if I, as a member of Parliament, are struggling to get my parents the care that they need, when I know all the people who I can contact to try and get hold of some help, then how is it for other individuals, other families, or people with no family at all? How do they even know where to start in what's quite a dysfunctional and broken system? And we also need to end access to care being dependent on personal wealth, and the social care sector often being delivered by private businesses who prioritise profits over people, and that those profits rarely trickle down to those hard-working carers on the ground. It doesn't go into improving care and the quality of living for their clients. Now, no one should be driven into poverty due to the costs of their care, and no care worker should be living in poverty or insecurity due to their poor pay and insecure working conditions, but it's prevalent across the care sector. And we can tackle care being a postcode lottery, subject to the whims of private investors who'll operate where they think it's the most lucrative rather than where there's the most need. And we can stop that feeling of dread when we think about trying to arrange support, how we're going to pay for that support, or fear that if the support can't be provided, then we'll have to go into care homes or residential settings. In short, we've got to put the care back into social care, and we've got to instil a belief that just like the NHS is a right to us all, social care is a fundamental human right. It's the backbone of a dignified society, and we don't have that backbone in our society at the moment, and that's what we need to do together to try and change things. Now, there's a few things that we can do to start trying to change things on the ground. We can set national standards that have to be met by all care providers and are monitored by an organisation with adequate powers to reinforce those standards. Services should be developed and delivered locally with full engagement with service users' voices at the heart of the design process, along with trade unions. And that'll ensure that people are getting their care needs met, ensure that money isn't wasted on initiatives inappropriate for the local area, and also mitigate against local NHS pressures as people are receiving the help they need to stay both physically and mentally healthy out of hospital and not ending up in a crisis. We also need to start now by ensuring that all carers are paid and supported adequately and fairly. They're performing an absolutely vital and essential service, which is both physically and emotionally demanding, and their pay or welfare support as unpaid carers, as well as the conditions like entitlement to paid annual leave, it needs to reflect that. A recent analysis by the Health Foundation found that 1 in 5 residential care workers in the UK live in poverty. And ensuring fair pay doesn't just help carers directly, but it'll also allow recruitment and retention of the best people for the job. It'll improve the service overall. Support should also include appropriate training, qualifications and career pathways for care workers to develop and support the skills to provide a high quality service in our communities. It should be seen as a profession, it should be paid as a profession and supported as a profession. Now, in terms of what the government's doing so far, we've not got to the National Care Service that I would like to see, that free, publicly run, owned by the people care service. But what we have seen is that they've started to look at fair pay agreements. They've announced £500 million to fund flagship social care policy in England and an extra £3.5 billion for social care in 28 to 29 in the last spending review. So that's great. I'll welcome that if it's followed through. But everybody here today knows that there are huge systemic problems in the social care sector, and a fair pay agreement is a kind of collective sector-wide bargaining. It's great, and worker bargaining power is going to make a huge difference to care workers on the ground. But the amount of investment promised so far by the government for the care sector is a drop in the ocean. It's not going to go very far when it's spread across the 1.5 million people working in social care and the millions of people who rely on that care. Now, the Health Foundation estimate that 2.3 billion is needed to increase care workforce pay in England to at least NHS Agenda for Change Upper Band 3. And that's excluding personal assistance. Now, if you combine that with the fact that local authorities are under extreme financial pressures after decades of austerity, and many social care providers are small, medium-sized businesses who might not be able to absorb rising costs, and we've got a recipe for disaster rather than an effective injection of much-needed central funding. And we can increase central funding if we fully commit to ending the unfairness that we see in our taxation system. And that's a taxation system that sees income from wealth taxed at lower rates than income from work. What we need to see is a fair economy, one that's where everybody can contribute according to their ability and where those with the broadest shoulders carry the greatest burden. And there's huge support for a fairer taxation system. And when I talk about a fairer taxation system, I don't mean increasing taxes for the vast majority of people. I mean asking those who can pay a bit more to pay a bit more. Wealth taxes. And there's huge support for this. There's a group called Patriotic Millionaires who I've been following for some time, who are a group of patriotic millionaires who found that I think it was 70 to 80% of millionaires in the UK support wealth taxes because they think it's the fair and proper thing to do to deliver the public services that we need to see here in the UK. So the Chancellor needs to be bold in the budget coming forward. We can afford to properly resource a care service. We can afford to plug the gaps that we currently see in our social care sector. But beyond this, and longer term, we have to be bold. When we set up the NHS in the 1940s, it was like the social care system is now. It seemed like a Herculean task to try and bring something so huge and so privatised into the public sector so that it was run for the benefit of the people. But we did it, and it's one of our greatest achievements as a country. Our next greatest achievement has to be a national care service, where everybody, no matter where they are, whatever their income, is entitled to a decent level of social care, delivered to them when they need it and how they need it, without having to battle through red tape or difficult systems just to get the most basic levels of care. I know you're going to be talking about this at your conference today, and I'm looking forward to hearing the fantastic ideas that you're going to bring forward. And just know that my door is always open. So if you want to put forward your ideas and you want me to champion them in Parliament, then please don't hesitate to give me a shout and send them through to my office. But for now, have a great day, and thanks very much for letting me have the opportunity to speak to you all. Solidarity.